things. I want to just make sure that you all know who he is and why he's here. Many of you already do know this. He is the co-discoverer of most of the known old growth in Massachusetts, and in a lot of the East. He has co-organized 10 or 11 Eastern Old Growth Forest conferences. He's been called the East's leading old growth forest evangelist. And he's a big part of the history of awareness of old growth that we now have. So that's all I want to say. And raise your hand.
I don't always know, folks, whether I can live up to the accolades, but there's some truth, and I'll explain it. When I was called the Old Growth Forest Evangelist by John Davis, who some of you may or may not know, but he's in New York in the Earth Island Institute, part of that. And my grandfather on my mother's side in the Southern Appalachians was a circuit riding Baptist preacher. And Monica said, Bob, you inherited the gene from the old gent, because there is a tendency to preach, I guess. So she has the on and off switch. It needs to be exercised. Just give her a week or so.
Forgot, it's the wood is absorbing all of the sound.
Oh, okay.
And you put that on your neck.
Like Dave Pierce.
Wow.
It's just going to help a little bit.
Okay, does this help any? Oh, okay, great.
That's it.
Okay, now, what I'd like to share with you as fast as I can, and by the way, in terms of why me here, you probably, I get a few words out and I can see, where's he from? Well, I gave it out of I'm from South Northampton, Massachusetts. No, I grew up in the mountains of the South and had a career in the U.S. Air Force. And when I went into the Air Force, my accent was, you could cut it with a knife. And they tried to beat it all out of me, but you can hear what's left. At any rate, by profession, I'm an engineer. And so one of the first things you learn is numbers for me. What's the dimensions of this tree? What's the age of that? I lived through numbers and the measuring of trees, the understanding of my surroundings often is highly numeric, but that's not the whole story by any stretch of the imaginations. And growing up in the shadows of the Great Smoky Mountains in eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina, I knew what old growth forests looked like. They were called virgin forests in those days. But I absorbed what that mark was. And when I retired and left the Pentagon in 1975 and retired up here in Massachusetts, my first inclination was to get out on the weekend and just start exploring the Berkshires and the Taconics and connect with nature, which has always been my underpinning in my life. And I started noticing places that had a lot of the same characteristics that I was accustomed to in the Southern Appalachians. The trees were smaller and whatnot, but the characteristics were the same. And I thought to myself, golly, in rooted, long-settled Massachusetts, could there be some old growth forests that escape notice? And the old saying, fools rush in where angels fear them. In I rushed. And I started partnering with different groups to include Harvard Forests Research Center, Harvard University's Research Center, Harvard Forest, and Peters F. Mass, and UMass, people at UMass, etc. Because basically I was saying, I'm finding places I think is old growth. Am I right? Will you all please come out and check them out? And one person took me up on it We were over in the southwestern corner of the state. We were up on a waterfall behind a school, and on a stream with a waterfall, and the waterfall was called Roaring Brook Waterfall. And I had been there before, and I thought, these are really old hemlocks. This is old growth surrounding this waterfall and surviving because of the rough terrain. So my friend, he had an increment board, which is an instrument that you can take a cord out of a tree and count the rings and thereby determine the stage. And so I told him, I said, Tad, I think, well, first of all, he said, Bob, what do you see? He wasn't necessarily buying or not that the place we were in was old growth. He said, what do you see? What do you think about that tree? And I said, well, Tad, I think if you core that tree, that hemlock, it's about, and I was fishing, 320, 330 years. I wouldn't be surprised. Well, I didn't think he was going to take me up on it. So he immediately took out a core, and it's a little risky to try to count rings on a core out in the field count. The odds of you being really accurate are low. But as God is my witness, he came out with 330 years. And all of a sudden, my stock went through the roof. I mean, I could say, I could do no wrong. Whatever I said, suddenly the next thing I knew, there were people from Harvard University saying, Bob, can you take us out in these places and catch us up on what is old, what you're seeing is old growth. So I was living in heaven. You know, I was out there right in the center of all this. And it came to pass that one of the people from Mass Audubon, a friend of mine, said, Bob, you know, we need conferences. We need to spread the word that there are places in the eastern United States never recognized as original, called virgin forest at that point in time, and you are really the person to do that. I had never put together a conference before, and I didn't know what to do. But this kept running. My brain just turned it over to my mouth, and I kept talking. In time, we had a conference set up at the University of North Carolina in Asheville for the first conference devoted exclusively to eastern old growth forests, exclusively. And we pulled in people from Washington, D.C. and the Forest Service, academic foresters and forest ecologists. We pulled in bearded, granola-eating, fire-breathing environmentalists. We pulled in politicians, and everybody loved it. They said this was one of the most fun conferences we'd ever had because we just let it unfold around everybody's participation. Worked so well, we started replicating that. Second Old Growth Forest Conference was in Williamstown here in Massachusetts, and we went right on through. Well, I could go on a long time about the history, but there were a lot of people that deserve to be up here just as much as I do that contributed along the way. And what we were doing was I would go out as kind of the scout and look at a place and say, well, it's got the characteristics that we associate with eastern old growth forest on this particular forest type. Can we dig a little deeper? And then the academics would come in, or the professional forest ecologists, whatnot, and then we would agree that an area was old growth forest and whatnot. Then I learned that there had been several people here before me that I didn't even know about that had recognized the area up here, if you go up Route 2, until where the Coal River comes around and joins Route 2, that whole area in there was considered a virgin forest, and at one time it was considered to be the largest limited old growth forest in the entire Union. Now, who knew that? Darn few people. But in 1980, it was declared a National Natural Landmark old growth forest. And yet, that just was not known by at all. So a lot of the challenge was to get people, make everybody aware of what we have left. Well, that's what we've got today. What we want to share with you today is not only the remnants of old growth, but the forest is maturing on its way to becoming old growth, and that's part of what the old growth forest network is about. Because we want these places that have all the developing characteristics to be left to fully develop, develop fully what we would call, what is it? Oh boy, back to because there's these many definitions of old growth forest because there are ecologists that pitch their head into the ring. At one point in time, the U.S. Forest Service had about 110 different definitions of old growth forest, and in their book that they published, a couple of those definitions were mine. And it is an ever-evolving idea of what it takes to be an old growth forest. Most recently, the big part of it that is now emerging as extremely important, critically important, is what's underground. It's what we don't see. It's the forest under the ground with all of the fungi, all of the small organisms that create this network of life that creates what's above it. And that is a hard thing to study because you're not talking about 10 or 15 or even 100 species. You're talking about literally thousands. But if you cut all the trees and you let the sun bake, and then let's say you plow it or whatnot, you kill a lot of that underground network of fungi and life. And then it's a different kind of a forest. If you're going to get the old growth back, it's going to take a long time to rebuild all that underground. But it does happen. Now, what is around you is a forest. By the way, this is along the original Indian Trail. I should not leave out the indigenous people who traveled this corridor. And the Mohawk Trail, called that Route 2, really gets its origin from an old Indian trail that connected the waters of the Connecticut with the waters of the Hudson River on the other side. And it went right through here. And there is actually a little piece of that trail that is still intact as a trail that, of course, Christian can take you to up on what we call Todd Mountain and Clark Mountain. And there's about 1.25 miles that is still the original trail. And there were artifacts found on that trail. So it's not, we're not guessing about it. There's a very interesting history on that one too, of how it fell out of use. It was a pathway for the Mohawk in particular, coming from the Mohawk River in eastern New York, and trading or making war with indigenous groups over here, to include the Algonquin-speaking tribes, and all of that played out in the late 1600s. So we know that the trail goes back in terms of a traveling corridor to that. We think back into the 1500s. We don't know before that. Could be, but we don't know. But we still have 1.25 miles of it left. It's not a pathway through somebody's barn. It's not now a U.S. route. It's not invisible. It's there. I consider that to be one of the real treasures of this area. So we have the original indigenous history. We have the old growth forest remnants here, about 600 acres. And we have a third forest, a younger forest, but still very mature, of the tallest trees we have measured in all of New England. Now, we'd like to share as much of that as we can with you. And I think probably if Monica doesn't pull that stop, my plug here, I could go on for a long time. So why don't we start, Christian, you've got to lead this and Marshall, we've got a big group here. So however you want to do that.
Yeah, let's do it. We're going to organize it a little bit. We're going to be traveling mostly on the road. So I hate to do this to y'all because you probably hasn't been since you're in elementary school, but Let's talk left side of the road if there's any cars. Yeah, we just all agree because otherwise we just spread out and the car's got to go between us. So any car that comes, just go to the left side of the road. Where do you want to be in the train? Well, you probably want to be near Bob. Anyway, Bob and Monica are going to be sort of middle of the train on our way to our next stop, which I think would be the Potomac Pines. Stop there.
No, just up the road.
Oh, just up the road. Great. I'm going to be doing a bit of interpreting myself. Why not? It's my job. I'm going to be up front. Why would you want to be up front with me? Well, maybe you want to get ahead of the bug spray. Maybe you enjoy my style of millennial humor. But mainly, maybe you just like the sound of my voice, which is both beautiful and sonorous. If you are hard of hearing, like I am, it's very. And I grew up in a hard of hearing family. Hence this is not a beer gut. This is a third lung. Like you will be able to hear me. Or if you just want to get a little more information, or if you're just a naturally fast hiker, I will be up front for you. The Leveretts will be in the middle, and if you brought someone you want to talk to, you are then the caboose. Anytime you get in a conversation with someone else, just be kind to the people that have a hard time hearing, and then just hang back a little ways. If anyone comes up with any issues along the way, Sarah would be happy to take them, and she can either fix it or find me when I catch my breath, and we will fix that for you. Sound good?
Yeah.
Sound good. We'll go up a little ways. Yeah.
Woo! Christian!
Anyone would like a little more information about the Old Growth Forest Network, there's tons of stuff up here. You can sign on to our mailing list if you would like to, or you can just come find me on the trail.
Makes sense.
Yeah.